Well, good morning. Today is the last installment of our What If series. If you don't know me, my name's Matt Rose. I'm the campus pastor guy who tries to lead this campus once in a while. I've really enjoyed this series. The reason I enjoy it is because there's nothing more that I like than to be able to exhaust my imagination trying to picture what God can do in me, what God can do through me, what God could do in this church and the broader community in this world. Because when I think about it, I start to get excited about the potential of what he might do. I start to see what he's doing a little bit more clearly. And many of us, we've spent the majority of our lives claiming to believe in Jesus, claiming to follow him in our lives. And don't hear this the wrong way. Like that's what it takes. Confess with our mouths that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead and we can be saved. And so many of us, we step into this walk with God, and as we get used to it, as we become familiar with the things that he's done, we become a little bit more comfortable, maybe stagnant in our relationship with him. And our imagination starts to fade or dissipate, and we step further and further into this stagnation. Which, let me be real with you, like you can have a relationship with God that accomplishes what your goals might have been when you stepped into it, salvation. But there's a thing called sanctification, the idea that God is working in you from the inside out to transform your thoughts into his thoughts, to take the things that were once attracted and attached to the world and shift them so you're no longer conformed to the things of the world, but you're thinking about the good things that come from God. This is what God is calling us to, a dynamic relationship with him. And so when we ask these what if questions, that's where our imagination starts to move and work, and we see a greater level of the picture he has for each of us. And throughout the series, we've been going through John chapter 17. And I love this because this is Jesus' what we call high priestly prayer, his prayer for his disciples and his prayer for those who would become his disciples. This is his heartfelt thoughts to God the Father. And he invites us into a community that we had never experienced before he came. He invites us into this Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And he says this near the end, and we actually read this last week in John chapter 17, verse 24, but I want to go through it again because we finished the passage, and I want to kind of summarize it today with an idea. Here's what verse 24 in John chapter 17 says. Father, I want those you have given me to be with me. And we said last week this is a mindset more than it was a location. To be with me where I am and to see my glory. The glory you have given me because you loved me before the creation of the world. That near the end of his prayer, what Jesus wants more than anything for those who would follow him, he wants us to see something that we have not seen. He wants to paint a picture for us that is more clear. You see, Paul says right now we see in a mirror dimly. There's this idea that we're in this already not yet period where we've seen a little bit of who Jesus is, but we've not seen him fully consummating what he says. But he wants us, as we go through our lives in this waiting period, to see him. Last week we said a glimpse of heaven, but today I want to ask you the question, what if we got the picture? What if we got the picture? That's not a mistake because, get it? Because it's not the full picture. I thought I was clever, but then I was looking at it, it's like they're totally going to think it's a mistake. But it wasn't. I did it intentionally. Sometimes I get creative and realize not everybody else is going to think about it that way. What if we got the picture? What if we got the picture? Can I tell y'all a story for a second? It's a pretty recent story. It was in September of 2021. I went to a place called Iceland. And this trip was different than any vacation I'd ever been on, not only because I had two kids at the time, and we all went, and we brought my mom too. And so it was a family trip. It was a little different. Couldn't accomplish some of the things I wanted to. But don't go through the pictures yet. But one thing that was unique about, it's okay, they saw it at this point. One thing that was unique about this trip was that I brought a DSLR camera with me. I borrowed it from Estrella Areola, if you remember who she was. She has left us now to go on and do great things. But I borrowed the camera from her, and it was Iceland, like I'm going to be there for a week. I want to remember Iceland. So and you remember how intense I was. Like I barely hung out with y'all. I was just getting pictures the whole time. I said, I'm going to get some good pictures. And so I did research on this DSLR camera, trying to figure out how I could take good pictures. And then we arrived, and then I started taking pictures. And what I didn't realize, I'd guessed it might be an issue, but there was like no sun the entire time we were there. It was cloudy the entire time. Now, when you have a camera like that, there are ways you can compensate for the lack of sunlight. But I'm going to show you a couple pictures because we had this process of me getting a little bit better, never getting that great. So I just need you to know up front, you're not going to see amazing, phenomenal pictures. But I got better. Here's the first picture I took. Check it out. See? I'm going to walk over here just to give you guys. See, there's a little bit, there's one spot where it's kind of clear. And the only reason it looks pretty is because you haven't seen lava rocks on the regular. But for the most part, it's just a landscape picture. This not that great. All right, let's go to the next picture. Yeah, this was the first waterfall we saw. And this is before I had figured out how to adjust lighting and all these other things. So, yep, that looks super depressing. Y'all want to go to Iceland right now. Here's the next picture. It's my wife and kid. I had to throw that one in there just so y'all know I love them. Sometimes I give them a hard time. But see, the lighting is way brighter there. You notice that? I don't know why. Look at the background. It looks blurry, frustrating. There's mist going everywhere. But Hannah, you look beautiful. Lucas looked great, except for the haircut. We didn't get him before we went. But otherwise, it was great. Let's move on to the next picture. This is the first real waterfall picture. This is, I think, called Skogafoss or something like that. I don't remember the names very well, but it was really big and a little bit of sun came out. But you see all the mist there? That was the best one I got. And I need to tell you, I posted this on Facebook and I got rid of all the bad ones. This is the best I could come up with. And look at that waterfall. It's gorgeous. It's green. Should have been better. Here's my next picture. See, this is where I started to learn a little bit more about the camera. What I learned is if you can do a couple things on the settings, you can start to capture movement rather than just these little moments, and it'll look better. And so you can see in that waterfall that you see I slowed the shutter speed down, and it looks almost like a painting. It's not great, but you see that person? Look at that person. That's a big waterfall. You should go stand there and just look at it. It's gorgeous. I started to get better pictures as I started to understand a little bit more about what it took. Let's go to the next picture. See, that one, that's a, what was it? Is it a humpback whale? Humpback whale? It's a humpback whale. It was super cool. And I tried to get a video from Hannah of what it looked like to go grab those pictures. Literally, the people with cameras at the bottom level were running around the boat trying to grab pictures of this thing. And then I got a couple pictures, and I was like, I've got to get it when he's, whatever they call that. He's like breathing. I don't know. He's shooting water out of the blowholing. I don't know. And so in order to get this picture, it was the opposite of capturing waterfall movement. I had to actually speed up the shutter speed because I was trying to capture this moment. I had to increase the shutter speed to like 4,000th of a second. It was crazy, but I got it, and it's a cool moment. Let's go to the next picture. So this is my last waterfall picture. And there was water on it, and it wasn't great. But there are a couple things I just want to, I don't care. But I do, because, when you're trying to get something, even if it doesn't look great, you want to just enjoy what your creation, if you will. And so I'm going to make you guys, because I got the stage today. It's not y'all. If y'all want to preach, you can, and you can show your pictures when you preach. But the cool part about it was I was actually holding it, and then I put it on a low shutter speed, and then I got a second and a half of it falling, and so it looked kind of like a painting. There's a lot of mist, and there's water on the thing because I was super close to it. But I was proud of it because I was learning how to get the picture a little bit more effectively. And what I learned over the entire trip is that there were, while many pictures I could get, there were two types of pictures that I was going for. There were moments that would happen quickly, and in order to get to it, I had to increase the shutter speed and really hustle in order to get exactly what I wanted to. And then there were other shots that required me to slow down the shutter speed so that I could capture not just a moment, but a millisecond or several milliseconds of movement. And to me, they're different and they're both beautiful. And I'm realizing that in my Christian walk, it's kind of similar. That sometimes we go about hustling, running. This is me. I'm just going to be honest with you. I'm hustling. I'll say this all the time. I'll say I run hard because I don't believe I can outrun God, and I want to be on the front end of what God's doing. And I'll run around trying to capture these different moments, no longer with a camera, but so that I have something that I can see the miraculous nature of God, so that I can see this moment. Many of you want to come to church on a Sunday because you think you're going to get a moment with God. Your week is so busy, and so you hustle here in the midst of your busy week trying to catch a picture of a moment. And then you leave and you have that moment to remember. Many of you went to camps growing up. I'll talk to students periodically, and they get excited about this Elevate conference that we're going to do because they want a moment where they get convicted. And their entire life is running around. They're playing sports. They're doing all these things, none of which are bad, but the pace of their lives prevents them from seeing God. And so they hustle, again, to capture a moment with God. But then these other shots that I'm trying to gather, the things that I see Jesus embodying in his lifestyle, even in this prayer where he is slowing down intentionally so that he can actually gather and understand what God's doing and what he's gonna do. Let me make this very simple for you. It's okay to go capture a moment. It's okay to slow down and try to gauge some movement. And that's the reason I was looking at these camera shots and I was like, man, there's a way that we can go about life. And sometimes we've got to pick up the pace in order to catch up and see what God's going to do. But other times, and these are really important times, we've just got to slow down a little bit. Like, you're not going to see. We're not putting up the points yet, sorry. I'm just introing right now. We got to slow down a little bit in order to gather what God's doing and what he's going to do. And as I look at that text, this is all Jesus wants from us. Sometimes he's got his disciples hustling. Sometimes he's got them praying and frustrated at them when they're not slowing down and praying. He wants us to understand who he is and what he's doing. He wants us to get the picture. And what I've learned is if you want to catch a moment, you got to move fast. But if you want to catch his movement, you got to slow it up a little bit. What are you trying to do? What are your goals in life? What is God trying to get you to do? If you want to see God's glory, you got to get a glimpse, not just of these little moments that you forget about. You got to get a glimpse of his movement. In order to do that, you got to do a couple things. And I want to talk through these 3 things today. And I'll give them to you really quick. I want you to practice focus. I want you to practice slowing down, and I want you to practice allowing him to transform you. I'll say it a different way, becoming sensitive to the Spirit of God. Let's talk about this first point, focusing. Did you know you can choose what you fix your eyes on? You can choose it. Now, if we're honest with ourselves, and if I'm honest with you, which I aspire to be honest with you at all times, sometimes it makes me look dumb. Other times it makes me look decent. But if I'm honest with you, my biggest struggle in my Christian walk is focus. Because there's so many things happening around me. There are so many things that I have, irons if you will, that I have put in the fire. There are a lot of goals that I have, a lot of past events that are impacting me both positively and negatively. There are so many things that just come into this body and in my mind and prevent me from being able to focus, not to mention the chemical compound issues that I have because I'm ADHD. And for you, I bet your life is very similar. Now, I want you to hear me up front. This isn't me saying to quit everything. A lot of people try to quit everything because they think it's going to make them focus. No. I think the best way to focus is to choose what to focus on. Hebrews would tell us to fix our eyes on Jesus, who's the author and perfecter of our faith. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 18 says, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. You've got to fix your focus. You have got to choose what to focus on. And I'm telling that to a group of people who have given their ability to choose to somebody else, to someone else. And I'm not just talking about physical. I'm talking about somebody spiritually. Maybe you've handed your thoughts over to Satan, not intentionally, but you're allowing him to direct your focus. Make a choice today. Choose this day who you're going to serve. You can choose in the morning to get up and be grateful for what God has done. You can do what Paul says in Philippians and say, I'm going to think on these things that are true, right, honorable, pure, lovely, of good repute. Because that's what's going to give me peace. I'm going to choose in the midst of these hard moments where someone said something negatively about me, or when somebody did something that offended me, or when I've got a future event that I'm nervous about and I'm thinking about it constantly, even though I can't control the outcome. I'm going to choose in those moments to take these thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ. You can choose it. I'm not saying it's easy. I need you to know it is anything but easy. It's simple for me as a preacher up here to say, choose it. But all week I've been struggling to choose it. But in the end, there is a matter of choice involved in what you're going to focus on. And if that negative thought that doesn't help you comes in, you can say, no, not today. I'm going to throw you away. And I'm going to focus on Jesus. Maybe I'll spend a little bit of time praying so that he can shift my focus. You've got to adjust your focus. And it's funny because when I was taking these shots, that was the first thing I was trying to focus on, right? Focus. I was trying to use the focus properly. It's really difficult. You got to choose what you're going to focus on in that shot in order to get the picture the way you want it to turn out. You seen those bad pictures? You've seen them. I see them every single time. No offense if you've taken a picture of me before. When I ask somebody else to take a picture of me and my wife, and I'm like, oh, that's good. In my mind, I'm kind of thinking like, if you would have just clicked on me on the phone, you would have gotten to focus on us as opposed to the person behind us, right? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be telling y'all that because one day you're going to take them, then you're going to be nervous as all get out. But you can choose what to focus on, even in those pictures. But one thing I started to do later with the camera is I realized that depending on the shot I took, I needed to zoom in or to widen my lens a little bit in order to get a more adequate shot and to capture more light. That picture with the whale, in order to get it, I had to zoom out a little bit because I needed more light to come into the camera because it was clearly shady on that side of the boat. And for many of you, you are zooming in a little bit too much on the areas that aren't helping you and are giving you negativity. If you would widen your perspective, widen your lens a little bit, and choose to focus on the big picture, you might do well. And here's what it says in Romans chapter 8, verse 18. He says, I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed in us. What does that mean? It means presently I'm struggling with something, but when I zoom out, I recognize that there's an eternal weight of glory that's waiting on me when Jesus returns that I haven't gotten to yet. And I know you're struggling in your marriages. I know you're struggling to raise your kids. I know you're struggling in your occupation and whatever thoughts that come into your head. I know it's a struggle, but if you can zoom out and choose to focus on the bigger picture, you would see that God could give you peace because there is something coming that is better, bigger than our suffering and our struggle. You got to choose what to focus on. Second thing that I learned as I was taking pictures is you got to slow down a little bit if you want to capture the movement of God. Don't you realize he speaks in a still small voice? That's what we learned when we were watching the story of Elijah unfold, when he's scared to death running from this woman Jezebel, and she's trying to get at him and to kill him. But he goes out in the wilderness, and God sends a flame or a fire. He sends a whirlwind. He sends all these different things. And it's not until things are quiet and calm that he hears the still small voice of God. And that there's storms you're going through in your life that get your focus. But if you can just slow down a little bit and recognize that God's in the midst of every struggle you encounter, you might be able to get to the place where you hear it. It's still, it's small, and in order to get it, to see his movement, you got to slow down a little bit. In order to capture something that was moving, rather than just getting one little moment where I see the little drips and dots and the things that you can see on a waterfall, in order to capture that painting-like picture, I had to slow my shutter speed down. And if God is speaking through a still small voice, we've got to slow down. What does he say in Matthew chapter 11? He says, come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. For I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. What does that mean? It means that if we constantly are are trying to get what we personally want, if we are constantly under the yoke of what the world would give us, that we have to garner this amount of success, we have to have this many friends, this many likes on Instagram, we have to be at this place socioeconomically, if we are constantly stressed out about that, then we're missing what Jesus is saying. He's saying, if you would fix your focus on me, slow down a little bit, and allow me to take these burdens, then I would take them, and you would find rest for your souls. You would find rest for your souls. Now, I need to be clear. When I say to slow down, I'm not saying to slow your pace. Hear me the right way. I'm not saying that you need to stop doing stuff. I'm not saying that you need to just quit everything that you have been pouring into that sometimes gives you stress. Otherwise, everyone would quit their jobs because our jobs can be stressful once in a while. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is a mindset that enables you to take those things, slow yourself down a little bit, and hand them over to Jesus. What is it? When we widen our lens, when we zoom out a little bit and we see the big picture, it enables us to say, you know what? This trial is going to last for a moment, but joy is going to come in the morning. This is where one of our wise people in this congregation said at our Christmas party, they said, I've learned to wait a little bit. I've learned to take a few minutes. I've learned to give people the benefit of a doubt, right? Where for me, I'm young, I'm 33, and giving people the benefit of a doubt is usually an afterthought. First, I'm like, oh, how dare they? They offended me. This is the worst situation that could possibly happen ever. When I'm in the midst of it, I'm struggling. And it requires me, I don't know, very practical stuff. Go take a shower, sit in the car, go drive the car around a little bit, listen to worship music. Take some time on your Saturday morning while your kids are sleeping in. Open God's word, read it. Slow down your thoughts a little bit because it's the fast pace of my brain that is causing me to make bad decisions and that's preventing me from taking these thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ. I got to slow this stuff down. That doesn't mean I turn into a lazy person. It means that my mind is walking at a consistent pace. It's not rushing. It's not stressed. It's not filled with anxieties. And sometimes it does mean you got to slow down a little bit physically. Sometimes you got a million things on your plate and you didn't choose 75% of those things. Did you know you can take control of your schedule a little bit? I just want to give you permission. I want to give you permission. Like, take this with a grain of salt because I don't know your family situation, your work situation, your school situation. I don't know what assignment your teacher gave you or what assignment your boss gave you. I need you to know that is my caveat before you go tell your boss, I'm going to take 3 days off right now, right? Okay, I just need to be clear on that. But sometimes you need to take control of your schedule because you allowing people to take control of your schedule is causing you to run, not with purpose, but to run aimlessly. And when you run aimlessly, you get tired. You become more susceptible to sin. You become less aware of what God's doing and less aware of what your body is doing. I need to tell you, last week, Thursday night, there were just a lot of things going on in my brain. Most of it didn't even pan out in reality. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. I haven't been sleeping, and I'm walking around pacing. You remember this, sweetie? You were stressed out. You called my mom. She needs to call you and talk to you a little bit. And I was just walking around like, man, this happened. I don't know what to do about this and all of this other stuff. And then I went and took a shower because it's very helpful for me to take a shower. And I thought for a moment, I said, I literally feel this in my chest. And I'm stressed out about all these things. And I'm like, this stuff really isn't that important, but my brain's telling me it is. And so it wasn't until I slowed down that I realized a couple things. I didn't eat a real meal this week. I didn't eat anything healthy. I was staying up. Sending emails until 1 o'clock in the morning. Then I woke up. I didn't work out at all last week. And then I get to the end of the week and my mind is going crazy and I wonder why I'm feeling this way. Well, the reality is nobody did anything to me. I didn't participate in the things that were healthy for me that week. And it wasn't until I slowed down that I realized what health looked like for me. You got to slow down. You got to slow down. Psalms 37 verse 7 says, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not for yourself over the one who prospers in his way. This is in comparison to another man, over a man who carries out evil devices. And this is what causes us stress so often, is we want to get ours in comparison to other people, we want to get to this place of success. But if you can get rid of that in your brain for a little bit, do what God calls you to do. And the only way you find that is by slowing your thoughts down a little bit, taking a break when you need that break, taking control over your schedules. You got to slow down. And y'all know how fast I run and all this other stuff that I do, and I'm constantly thinking, work way too many hours in a week sometimes. Like that is me. And God has been convicting me probably years at this point to figure out how to slow my thought processes so that I can focus more and more and more on Him. Again, not saying you got to stop running if that's what God's calling you to do, but you got to run with purpose, not aimlessly because people dictated your schedule for you. Take those thoughts captive. And the third thing we've got to do is we got to allow God to develop us, You know, it's interesting when you're taking a picture in the dark or when there's a lack of light, there's this thing called ISO, right, on the camera. What that means is the camera's internal ability to embed light into a photo when it's dark outside. And the reason I was thinking about that was because there was a picture I wanted to take. Don't show the picture yet. There's a picture I wanted to take, and it was in the dark. And I started to do research on how to do it. And the goal of those things, you have to slow down the shutter speed in order to get this picture because it allows more light to come in over a certain period of time. You've got to widen your lens to what they call infinity in order to take in more light. And the third thing you have to do is you have to turn up the ISO, the internal sensitivity of the camera, so that you can grab that light and enhance it over time. And I thought that was a really cool picture for me personally. You guys might be thinking, why is he talking about cameras so much right now? Well, for me, it was cool because there is a level where God has placed His Spirit in each of us, and we are called in the midst of these dark seasons where it's difficult sometimes to slow down, where it is difficult to get the picture that God has for us. We are called to tap into the power of God's Spirit. He actually says this in John chapter 16 before we get to John chapter 17. This is what Jesus says about the Spirit. It says, but when He, the Spirit of truth, comes, He will guide you into all truth. He will not speak on His own. He will speak only what He hears, and He will tell you, it doesn't say what happened, He will tell you what is to come. And God has drawn each of us into a calling of following His Son, Jesus. And as He's called us into that, He wants us to step forward into that. And many of us stay stagnant in our relationship with Him because we look forward and we say, we don't know what's coming. But what this text tells me is that if you can become sensitive, turn that sensitivity up in your heart and in your mind as you're reading God's Word, if you can become sensitive to God's Spirit, then He will give you wisdom that you don't currently have, that doesn't currently occupy your thoughts. Proverbs would tell us, pray for wisdom and discernment. He'll give it to you. And when He puts His Spirit in you, I know it sounds supernatural. It is supernatural. It's weird. It is strange. But if we can enhance our sensitivity to God's Spirit, it'll change your life. I'm not saying to go crazy with it. I'm saying to try to develop an acumen for it and understand what is sensitivity or what sensitivity to the Spirit would bring for you. As I seek Him, I get more of it. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6, he says, for God, who said, let light shine out of darkness, made His light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ. We got to turn up that internal sensitivity to the Spirit of God. And so let me refresh you on those 3 points. They're right here. We got to focus. We got to focus. We got to widen our lens and get the proper perspective. We got to slow down. Because when we slow down, that's when we start to see and hear the still small voice of God. And then we got to allow Him to develop us from the inside out. Not to be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. We got to let the light of Christ shine on each of us. And really, the reason that I started talking to you guys about taking the pictures in Iceland was because that was what clicked to me by looking at something physical and technical, was that God wants us to do all of these things in order to gain grasp on the picture He has for us. I want to show you another picture. This is not a picture I took. I want to tell you up front. This is the Aurora Borealis, or the Northern Lights. And in order to take a picture like this, you have to do all of those things. You have to widen the lens to infinity in order to get the full perspective of the night sky. You have to adjust the focus. You also have to slow that shutter speed down 15 seconds sometimes, which is crazy because remember the whale picture was 1/3000th of a second. That was the shutter speed. And you have to slow it down significantly. And the third thing you have to do is you have to turn up the ISO a certain amount because in order to capture that light, you have to make your camera more sensitive to what it's putting in because it's dark outside. That is a near perfect, it's widened right now so you can see the pixels, but it's a near perfect picture of the northern lights. And that was what I was hoping to get when I went. I spent all week trying to get a picture of it, trying to adjust my settings and figure out what it took in order to get there. And it was cloudy all week. And it was just a struggle to even find it or see it. And it was like our second to last night, and we signed up for a Northern Lights tour, and the bus tour canceled because it was cloudy outside. But some tour that was probably like unethically taking people out because it was cloudy outside said that we would see the Northern Lights if we got in a boat and went out. So we got in this boat. We go out far from the city, and they tell us we're going to see Northern Lights, but it's complete cloud cover. And so I'm standing in this boat trying to do all the things that you're supposed to do in this picture. But the boat is rocking. It's frustrating. And you can't have a 15-second shot when you're standing in a moving boat. It's not going to work out. And I'm looking up, trying to get pictures, and I couldn't see anything but clouds. And as much as I would like to get this perfect picture, I think our lives look more like this next picture where, for real though, like it'd be nice if I could go out in the middle of the woods and slow everything down, enhance my sensitivity to the Spirit of God, and then adjust my focus accordingly so that I can see the big picture. Wouldn't that be nice if I could just go out in perfect conditions? But I don't know about you, but I'm not in perfect conditions. I feel like I'm on a boat. I'm on a different boat than you, but we're all just rocking, struggling in each of our particular storms. And when we look up, we don't see God, we see a bunch of clouds. And I hear the preacher telling me, figure out where you can find God. He's available. He's ready to be found by you if you would just seek him. But I don't see anything with the naked eye. And so on this boat, I'm standing here, rocking back and forth, looking like this dummy, put my elbow on the side of it, lifting it up, saying, I don't know if there's anything up there, but I'm going to adjust my setting to 2 seconds, not 15, because I wouldn't get jack squat. I'm going to widen my focus. I'm going to increase the ISO, and I took a picture. And this is what I got when I took the picture. I didn't see it. It wasn't until I looked at the camera that I saw it. And then everybody in the boat comes up to me like, you got the Northern Lights, bro? I'm like, yeah, I did. and you know, the funny thing is, this is after Photoshop. It's all I got. But you know what? Doing all the tricks, focusing, slowing down, enabling myself to be more sensitive to the Spirit. That's what happens in my spiritual walk. It might be hard, and you might not get that perfect image that you're looking for. But if you just get a glimpse, that was good enough for me. Yeah. I posted it on Facebook. Yeah. Y'all were like, man, that dude can't take photos. I was on a boat. I was struggling. And I know we get in this place where we're struggling because we're in the midst of our storms and we get a little glimpse of heaven, and then we're thinking everybody else around us is going to think negatively on our little glimpse. And I just need to tell you, a little bit can get you a long way. And there's going to come a day where the situation is more apt for you to do it. The conditions are going to be a little bit better. You're going to see those moments. You're going to capture God's movement. But even in the midst of hard times, if you would focus, slow down, and allow him to embed himself into your spirit and become more sensitive to what his word says, you'll get something. And this is all Jesus wants from us. He wants us to try to get the picture he's giving to each of us. And it takes effort. It takes time. But if you would focus, slow down, increase your sensitivity, you would see it. And most weeks, this is what my picture looks like. But some weeks, keep in mind, you're still not going to get a good picture if you don't do those things, even in perfect conditions. So what that means is that I need to adjust my settings in order to be more sensitive to the movement of God. That's why I showed you those pictures, because that's what I feel like my spiritual walk looks like. And for anyone in here who's struggling to see God, I get it. I understand it. It's not easy, but as you move forward, adjust your settings, and you'll start to see his Spirit move in you. So if everybody would bow their heads and close their eyes, there's some of you in here who have never trusted in Jesus. hadn't started adjusting the settings necessary to see what he'll do. And the conditions may be right in church one day, and you might see him in a way that you've never seen him before. But I want to encourage you to seek him where he may be found in his word, and he will be found by you. Increase your focus, slow down a little bit, and try to turn up the volume of his still small voice. And one way you can do that is just to choose today to push out some of these other thoughts and choose to follow Jesus for the rest of your life. You can do it something simple like this. God, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. I believe he died on the cross and rose from the grave. Father, forgive me of my sin. Help me walk with you, for the rest of my life. I believe that your Son has offered me salvation. You might say something like that. If you would pray that today, God will give you clarity for the rest of your life in this process called sanctification. But for the rest of you, I know you need to turn that sensitivity up because you got God's Spirit. He's just being deafened by the sounds of all of these you're just being deafened by the sounds of all of these other things happening in your life. You can still focus, slow down, and turn up the volume a bit. So regardless of where you are today, I want to encourage you to take a step toward a dynamic relationship with God. God, I pray for the people under the sound of my voice. God, I pray that they would trust you at a deeper level. They would focus on you, gain the perspective that you have, because these sufferings last for a moment, but your joy comes in the morning. Help us slow down and help us turn up the volume so we can hear the frequency of your Spirit. God, we love you and we trust you. It's in Jesus' name that we pray. And all God's people said, amen. Now, there are going to be people in the back at these tables in the corners who, if you just prayed that prayer, if you're ready to accept Jesus into your life, they can chat with you about it. If you just need prayer in general to help you focus, slow down, and increase the volume of the Spirit in your life, they can pray that God would help you do that. And so I'd encourage you, as we stand and sing, feel free to go back there and receive prayer. As we continue in worship, it's my prayer that God will be honored and glorified. So if you guys would stand with me, let's worship one more moment. Turn up the volume and allow God to speak.